Yeah, you can trust them. They're the Teen Titans.
No, we're not.
Oh, right. They're the Young Justice League of America.
No, we're young, but we're just us.
Oh, okay. Young Justice.
No, young, just us.
Right. Young Justice.
Fine, whatever. You only need one word to sum up the first 3 issues of the Young Justice ongoing series, and that word is goofy. Whereas The Secret had been fairly serious and self-contained, and World Without Grown-Ups used childish goofiness mainly to contrast the more down-to-earth adult side, Young Justice issues 1 through 3, plus 1, but we'll get to that, are straight up silly. They are, in fact, so silly that if you're reading the collected trade, you might be tempted to skip over them. But in doing so, you'd miss a lot of setup, and there's a surprising amount of detail here that turns out to be called forwards to later events. Issue 1 opens presumably right after the events of World Without Grown-Ups, with Robin, Superboy, and Impulse camping out in the now empty secret sanctuary in Happy Harbor. At this point in time, the sanctuary had most recently been occupied by a time-displaced legion of superheroes, but had since been mothballed and was used primarily as storage for the JLA. As established here, it's been loaned out to the boys for their fledgling, currently unnamed Triad super team. While goofing around, the boys find what they think is a statue, but turns out to actually be the superhero Red Tornado, who for some reason doesn't get an origin in the Secret Files, despite being probably the single most important adult influence on the entire book. Short version is, he's an air elemental who should have had a human host, but wound up in a robot instead. He has a human nature and personality, but sometimes loses touch with it, as he had here. He'd put himself in storage some years prior because he believed his humanity to be gone forever, which meant he had no reason to continue existing. But then the boys showed up, and their horsing around in the sanctuary has re-inspired his human emotions. Specifically annoyance. To show his gratitude, Red Tornado tags along while the boys investigate a mysterious artifact at the local archaeology dig. There we're introduced to the secret agent duo of Donald Fight and Ishido Mad, aka Fightin' Mad, of APES, the All-Purpose Enforcement Squad, a, quote, multinational cooperative task force with more clearance than God. Also on site is a news reporter, Ace Atchinson, the guy who inadvertently gives Young Justice their name, and an archaeologist, Dr. Nina Dowd, transformed by the mysterious artifact into the Mighty Endowed, a supervillain who hypnotizes men with her enormous tracts of land, which are so big that she can't stand up on her own and is easily defeated by her own body weight. And she got turned into this because of a booby trap. And it's here where I should mention that the writing duties have officially been handed over to Peter David, famed for his acclaimed work on The Incredible Hulk, Spider-Man 2099, and The Atlantis Chronicles, among many others. He is also a man who truly loves his puns. David, along with Todd Nowick and Larry Stucker, would be the primary creative team for the entire ongoing, giving the overall book a much more consistent feel than you'd usually expect over the course of 5 years. I'd also credit their teamwork with the book's tone, which is a huge part of its appeal. In a way, it's got much more in common with the Teen Titans animated series, the original one, than with the Young Justice cartoon. Remember how Teen Titans could bounce from a lighthearted adventure against, like, the Mad Mod to the really dark stuff like Robin's drugged-out PTSD flashbacks? Yeah, Young Justice walks that same kind of line, only here the cartoony exaggeration is flavored more by American animation and humor comics than by the anime and manga of Teen Titans. Anyway, the artifact that made the Mighty Endowed turns out to be some kind of bizarre futuristic vehicle, which they, read Superboy, immediately start calling the Supercycle, though to me it's always looked more like a dune buggy with a trailer. Robin accidentally activates it and gets stuck in the driver's seat, literally, which means that, despite the boys' best efforts, they're all on board when it suddenly takes off, and issue 1 ends with them shooting off into the stratosphere. Issue 2 doesn't have nearly as much foreshadowing, and it's much goofier, so we're gonna take this fast. The cycle drags the boys around the world at ridiculously fast speed, accidentally solving and kind of causing some major disasters, including one involving the Titanic 2, and another featuring nuns with a station wagon full of explosives. They're rejoined by Red Tornado and Zero In, thanks to the cycle's homing system, on the palace of a sheik, don't ask, named Ali bin Stein, yes, really, where... Okay, Fightin' Mad, I know you're being established as recurring antagonists right now, but how the hell did you get here? You were in Rhode Island like an hour ago. This is the Middle East, and... Oh, never mind, superheroes. The cycle releases what appears to be a giant statue, but instead turns out to be a multi-armed giant warrior called Rip-Roar, apparently imprisoned there by the gods of New Genesis, who are a very long story that we don't have time to cover here. Google is your friend. Said gods also turn out to be the creators of the Supercycle, which apparently people more well-versed in comics than me would have known right off the bat, because the previous Supercycle had been the ride of choice for Jack Kirby's Forever people. There's a rip-roaring fight, oh god, now I'm doing it, that ends with Rip-Roar and Robin pulling a let-him-choose moment with the Supercycle, which turns out to be sentient because new god tech, shut up. The cycle hilariously chooses Robin, Rip-Roar's temper tantrum gets him buried in lava, and the Sheik offers the boys a reward for saving his life. Put a pin in that. It and the new god stuff will be important much later on. Issue 3 is a Halloween special. It amuses the hell out of me because it's a self-contained standalone that goes so off the rails that it feels like it should be non-canon, but it also gets referenced outside of this series, thus its canonicity is indisputable. So it's Halloween, and under the cover of costumes and candy, there's cultists doing their thing. Techno-magic cultists. Techno-magic cultists circa 1998, which means there's COBOL involved, and probably AOL. Kids, ask your parents. It backfires within 3 panels and the cultists get fried, but their attempt does manage to summon something into the real world via a dot matrix printer. Cut to a school gym where the boys are hosting a community party full of teens who are clearly older than them. Side note, this little adventure is called The Issue Before the One Where the Girls Show Up. Gotta love that self-aware humor. As is probably to be expected, the boys of Young Justice hosting a party leads to a fair few harmless but entertaining shenanigans, which then give way to not-so-harmless shenanigans as some party guests turn old and others are forced to dance without being able to stop. Yep, the summoned entity has arrived, and if he looks familiar, it's only because he should. This mischievous little punk is 5th-dimensional imp and recurring Superman villain Mr. Mxyzptlk. Mxyzptlk? Mxyzptlk. Screw you, I'm calling him Mr. Mixie. Although, Mr. might not be the word to use here because, as Robin soon notes, this Mixie insists on being called Professor, says that Mxyzptlk is not his name, and is much younger than he should be. But, in this rare case, it's not that Mixie's been made younger, it's that this is a younger Mixie, one from earlier in his own timeline. Upon realizing this, Superboy confronts Mixie with the knowledge that his future self will be a major pain in Superman's butt, which young Mixie finds irrational and banal. He vows to never indulge in such things, dedicating his life purely to science and learning, which of course immediately transforms the world outside the gym into a nightmarish hellscape of destruction and fire. And I'm just gonna stick this counter down here in the corner, no real reason, just ignore it for now. Luckily, this whole affair is quickly resolved by showing Mixie some Three Stooges films and a goofy-looking nerd, which makes him laugh until his hair turns white. He pops off back to his timeline and the world returns to normal, save for a Mixie-themed carnival in the town outside. Cue studio laugh track, and fade to black. These 3 starter adventures are not deep, and most of what really matters about them isn't going to come into play for a while yet. So there isn't a lot here to analyze, but I do want to talk about the name for the series and how it came about both in and out of universe. Based on the early references scattered across the DCU in build-up for their premiere, it seems clear that the Young Justice League was originally going to be the team name and series title. I've not been able to find any official reason for why the League portion was dropped, but I have guesses. 1, Young Justice just sounds better, less clunky and less, Silver Age-y. If you told me this was the result of test audiences, I would not be surprised. More importantly, dropping the League speaks to a shift in the team's intention. The Young Justice League, or Justice League Jr., are names that scream Sidekick Club, implying that they would be an offshoot of the Justice League, maybe even under the League's direct supervision. And maybe that's how the team was originally conceived. A similar idea was pitched early in the development for the Justice League cartoon. But by the time the series got going, Young Justice was decidedly not affiliated with the Justice League, despite the mentor relationships and using their old HQ as a clubhouse. Hence the explanation in universe, Bart's repeated insistence that the team is young, just us. which, incidentally, is the name of that first adventure and, as you may have noticed, this retrospective. At this point, they're not even a team, they're just having a sleepover. They're just a bunch of kids. And you'd be amazed how much that winds up defining the tone and themes of the series, even after they officially come together and add to their membership. Now, issue 4 is the one where the girls show up, and where these wacky adventures start to take on a new level of nuance. So, while we've just got the 3 boys, there's one more issue we need to talk about. Young Justice number 1 million, part of the DC 1 million event that ran at the end of 1998. The basic premise saw the Justice League from over 80,000 years in the future come back in time to recruit the modern JLA for a series of celebratory games that almost immediately went tits up. In practice, the real fun was in giving every comic active at the time a special number 1 million tie-in issue, some of them direct continuations of the miniseries, but others simply standalones that play with the far-out premise. Young Justice 1 million is one of those, featuring the 3 members of Young Justice Legion S meeting up in their secret headquarters, which is full of neat statues hinting at a few incoming members and some who are much farther in the future. First to arrive is the 1 millionth clone of Superboy, who is basically our Superboy with a stupid haircut. Next is Robin, the toy wonder, easily my favorite concept of this entire hypothetical future. Robin here is a robot, built by the far future Batman with the personality based on Batman himself as a child. It is the most on-the-nose metaphor for the role of Robin to ever be, and I love it. The third member, naturally, is Impulse, who here is, quote, thought to be the personification of the random thoughts of speedsters who traveled through the Speed Force, which seems like appropriately flashy nonsense. Whatever he is, he's made of energy and appears capable of physically jumping in and out of people's minds like he does with Superboy. They've gathered in their secret clubhouse because Robin has recovered a cryogenic chamber containing an original member of Young Justice, complete with a logo. They don't know who it is, so they set up a revival process to defrost him, and in the meantime they tell stories supposedly of their predecessors' adventures in the 20th century, which actually means retelling major comic events so that they're the central part of the narrative. Superboy kicks things off with the death of Superman, or at least a version where Superboy single-handedly kills Doomsday by shoving the entire planet out from under his feet. For Robin, I think it's 0 Hour with a side of random Gotham events, like the earthquake from the then-recent Cataclysm and Batman breaking his back, all done in a style reminiscent of the DC animated universe, which is really adorable. I've always liked their tiny, scrappy version of Tim. And I think Impulses is supposed to be a reference to Millennium, but I haven't actually read Millennium yet, so I don't know. He might also just be retelling the first few issues of Young Justice, only to end off with a visit from the Millennium Chicken. The storytellers then get into an argument over what kind of Millennium animal it actually was, then get into a fight over the defrosting controls, and vaporize the YJ member in the tube. The boys, for given value of boy, decide to just keep this whole embarrassing incident to themselves and talk wistfully about how their namesakes were legendary and that they're standing in the footsteps of giants. And also the Millennium Chicken. DC 1 million was presented as a celebration of the DC universe as it existed at that time, and its ultimate message was that it all mattered. That the heroes weren't just people, they were icons, symbols worthy of lasting respect, and that their adventures weren't just meaningless struggles, but climactic events that history would remember, even if the details got lost along the way. And yeah, in retrospect, the fact that some participants couldn't even survive the 90s can make that idea seem pretty silly. Looking at you, Resurrection Man. But when it works, and Young Justice is one of the best examples, because those themes of legacy and a hopeful future are built into the DNA of the series. From the very beginning, there's this steady subtext through Young Justice that these kids are the new generation of heroes. Even if they're far from ready now, someday they are going to be the Justice League, hence their original team name. And that's presented as a good thing, a hopeful future not just for them, but for the world. 1 million, by the happy coincidence of coming out early in the series' run, helped to solidify that. It's a theme that's only going to grow stronger and more nuanced as the team roster grows, as we'll be seeing for ourselves next time, when the girls finally show up.